Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to hear and to share and to learn and to grow. We thank you for the lives and the journeys that we've been on, and pray that you continue to guide our footsteps where we will not stumble. We thank you for the experiences that will be shared, the knowledge that will be shared, and we pray for the overstanding of your word and your way. We thank you so very much for this opportunity. We pray that you continue to anoint us and protect us, and your favor be upon all that we do, is my prayer. Amen. Ashe.
Ashe.
Hey. All right. Hello, family, and welcome to Black Knowledge Matters. We have a very special guest with us this episode, and we are extremely grateful that he is joining us to discuss recently published work and this breadth of a career that he has had as an artist. Mondre Moffett is a prolific trumpeter, composer, arranger, band leader, and educator. Born in Austin, Texas, referred to as the live music capital of the world. Raised in Austin and the Houston suburb of Rosenberg, Texas. His career as a musician spans several decades, touring with the Duke Ellington Orchestra and the Charles Moffett Family Jazz Band. As an esteemed musician, he has played jazz with jazz legends, including Pharoah Sanders, McCoy Turner, and Stanley Jordan. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in musical performance from New College of California, a Master's of Arts degree in music composition from New York University, and a Master of Music degree in music education from Boston University. Currently, he resides in Kentucky with his wife, and he is the father of 5 adult children. He graces Black Knowledge Matters with his presence to discuss his book, Black Music Footprints, The Jazz Experience, a work that honors the artistry of Black musicians since the 19th century, from the roots of jazz to its global impact. Brother Moffett, welcome to Black Knowledge Matters, and thank you for joining us to inform and nourish us. And I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Brother Yusuf. I really appreciate that introduction. I feel like I've come full circle and coming home. You know, Doris is my cousin, and I like to just say how delighted I am to be with this family at Wosay. I had the privilege of performing trumpet music many years ago, many decades ago, at Wosay Community Church in Oakland. And of course, my brother Imhotep has been so much a part of my journey in terms of inspiration. So I'm just delighted to be here. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
And I'm going to interrupt, and I apologize, but as Mondre mentioned, that was 1982 when Dr. Ben came to Wosay, Oakland on Galindo Street, that Mondre was there for us. As Imhotep reached out to what musicians he could get. So Mondre was there, and we call that was our breakout event, and he was a part of that. So thank you.
And it's around that time when I was writing the symphonic work, and in my third movement, I didn't have a title for it. And I was talking with Imhotep, and he said, and I played a little bit of it for him, and he said, "Man, that sounds like the city of Thebes." And I said, "What? The city of Thebes?" And I named the movement of that symphonic movement, the city of Thebes. And I don't know if I got a chance to really tell him how dear that was to me, but certainly will carry on in his legacy. Uh, yeah, Black Music Footprints, the Jazz Experience. I wrote this book because I just thought that um, there's not enough emphasis on the phenomenon of Black music in terms of its diversity. The overarching idea was to write a book to celebrate the rich diversity of Black music from its inception, but with the lens from a jazz experience. And that experience had to do with some of the core values of being a jazz musician, what it brought to the table in performing music. So when you're thinking about the jazz experience, you're talking about, you know, paying honor to mentorship, that I had plenty of mentorship, the discipline, the woodshedding, the practicing, walking in the footsteps of giant musicians, and placing honor on tradition versus traditionalism, creativity, spontaneity, and being in a moment. That's the perspective that I brought to this particular text, Black Music Footprints, the Jazz Experience. Many times I have to point my students to look at tradition, to look at the truth telling, the storytelling, all the things that jazz musicians use to, further their music and perform with a sense of integrity. So this performance idea from jazz musicians, being in the presence of musicians like Art Blakey, listening to his wisdom, being in the presence of musicians like Pharoah Sanders, in the avant-garde music genre, Arnett Coleman, and in Oakland you had people like Ed Kelly. There was provided a lot of mentorship and advice. Bill Bell, and just Oakland was rich with a lot of outstanding musicians um, to perform and to approach your craft with integrity. And so the woodshedding part of it is spending time doing the things in private what people in public don't see, but the results is authentic performance. So beginning with if I look at it, if you look at it from the beginning, this the outline I thought I would share with you, going all the way back to the beginning of the 20th century, going back to jazz, the birth of jazz in New Orleans, 1900, the classic jazz era from 1900 to 1930. The first part of it was New Orleans style jazz. The second part of it was Chicago style jazz, New Orleans 1900 to 1917. And then that represents the New Orleans style jazz. And then from 1917 to 1930 represented the Chicago style jazz. So within the genre of jazz, there were many, many styles. That seed that was laid for jazz music grew out of, 19th century, around about 1890 and a little before, of ragtime music. And one of the most outstanding musicians that even perhaps still may not get enough credit would be Scott Joplin. His piece in 1899, Maple Leaf Rag, really set the bar for composition in American music. And he was wanted to make sure that he elevate black music at the time, coming out of the whole minstrel era where blacks were being used and portrayed in a demeaning way, blackface and things like that that did not honor uh, the black performers. And so Scott Joplin really wanted to be a person that elevated the art form. And that elevation led the first jazz musician, the king of the father of jazz. His name was Charles Buddy Bolden. I had the privilege of working on a film entitled King Bolden, and we shot in New Orleans, and I got a chance to really visit all of the things that really in Congo Square that brought about this whole evolution of black music. But at the beginning, you had trumpet kings to follow. The king of the music was someone who always played trumpet from the very inception. So you had King Buddy Bolden, trumpeter. You had uh, King Oliver, who was Louis Armstrong's mentor. Then you had Louis Armstrong, Pop Satchmo Armstrong. And so the list goes on with trumpeters in that era that led the way. But Louis Armstrong would probably represent the greatest of that particular generation. And those guys migrated to Chicago. And so what you start getting into in terms of the styles of music in black music, you had to pay attention to the instruments that were being used to determine the style. So as you know, in New Orleans, you had the tuba, you had banjo, the African West African instrument, you had trumpet, clarinet. You lit nine ten-piece band because of the marching and the dancing idea of black music. Because up to that time, all of black music, even to up to 1940s, were used for dancing from the oral tradition. Started all the way back from the ring shout, the West African ceremonial dance, and then the cakewalk, and all those things were being practiced in Congo Square up until 1890. And out of that experience at Congo Square, you had the second line, and King Buddy Bolden was crowned king of jazz because he was basically the leading figure in the second line parades. You know, the first line was the officials of the parade. The second lines were the musician, and then all of the community would join in and do the shuffle, and they would do the shuffle, and the dance that would happen would resemble the ring shout that had been banned, just like earlier the drums had been banned, and it just re-emerged in a different way. And taking bits and pieces of ideas and representing it in a certain way. Uh, the same happened with the Negro spirituals, was taking bits and pieces of material and then reorganizing it and being creative with it. But by 1930, during the 19, you had a shift in the instrumentation. But it was being saxophone in the 1930s became the most prominent instrument in black music with the emergence of the institution of the jazz orchestra. And that was a phenomenon all to itself. Because when you think of the jazz orchestra, certainly it's not anything that resembles the European classical orchestra. It's a concise, five saxophones, three trombones, three trumpets as a minimum, full rhythm section. And there's a particular order and protocol on where these musicians will sit. And the saxophone became a prominent instrument during that era. You had the father of the tenor saxophone, Coleman Hawkins, and then you had the president, uh, President Lester Young, who Billie Holiday gave him that particular name, Lady Day. And along with the prolific jazz orchestras led by Duke Ellington, you had Count Basie, Fletcher Henderson, Cap Calloway, the list goes on. You also featured the female vocalists such as Lady Day, Billie Holiday, you had Ella Fitzgerald, you had Sarah Vaughan. And then at the piano during that same time of the 1920s going into the 1930s, you had Blind Arizona Drains, who was the first gospel piano player who discovered uh, the gospel beat. She defined a gospel beat. So now this diverse genres in black music emerging, first emerging in the 1920s going into the 1930s. You still had country blues that came out of 1865, the Mississippi Delta, solo guitar and male voice. Anytime you hear solo guitar and male voice, country blues. Remember, the instruments determine the style. And then you had urban blues that hit in the 1920s in Chicago, along with the emergence of classic jazz era with with Louis Armstrong and King Oliver's band. You had urban blues, as well as an emerging gospel music, um, gospel hymns. It wasn't quite gospel music yet. That came about in 1931. But the father of gospel music, Thomas Dorsey, came out of being a music director for Ma Rainey, the mother of the blues. So in Chicago, you had Thomas Dorsey, uh, who was an emerging piano player and composer, who had a first hit record, blues record, entitled Tight Like That. This is before Take My Hand, Precious Lord, and all the things that he did in Chicago. He's living in Atlanta at the time as well. But he learned to write music working with Ma Rainey uh, and also Bessie Smith, the two singers of urban blues. And I mentioned Arizona Drains, who had a band, and she started the gospel hymns that led to gospel music. But one of the things that, if you listen to Arizona Drains, you would definitely hear the influence that Scott Joplin played on her piano playing. She sounds just like a ragtime pianist. So 1930, you had a sunburst of jazz orchestras. You also had the emergence of gospel music, Pilgrim Baptist Church in Chicago, um, led by Thomas Dorsey, directing a children's choir because the adults did not want that music in the church because it was the same music that he played on Saturday nights with different lyrics. Then you had also, uh, in addition to urban blues, you had classic jazz era with uh, Louis Armstrong and playing with his mentor. Now, Louis Armstrong is playing second trumpet. The great Louis Armstrong, he even had a mentor. Talking about the jazz experience and walking in the footsteps of giants to mentor and encourage. King Oliver was his mentor. And King Oliver had many inventions. I was looking around for my trumpet mute. He invented this plunger. He would put the toilet plunger at the end of his trumpet to make his instrument sound like a human voice. So all of this music by 1930 is really a combination of what had been happening since 1865 with the four styles of African American folk music, with the field hollers and the work songs and the Negro spirituals and the dance, the ring shout. With all of uh, that music, the characteristics primarily being what we call and response, syncopation, and attributes of African vocality. These are three primary characteristics that identify Black music. Call and response, which was used to provide a core value of bringing everyone together. And you hear this call and response throughout the history. Attributes of African vocality, that's the moans, the groans, even when James Brown says, with your bad self. That's an attribute of African vocality. And some of it deals with coded language, the cult spiritual, for example. There were songs that was just a moan altogether. And syncopation, the rhythm, the displacement of the beat, you know, and the rhythm, the beat is not there, but it's silent and a displacement of the beat. So the end of the beat or the total displacement of the beat was big in New Orleans. That would cause the music to dance. The beat before the downbeat, the end of four, the beat before four. which is New Orleans. One, two, three. One, two, three. The beat, that accent before the beat four was the New Orleans beat that was very much akin to what we call the Pentecostal beat. And this is a very, very significant part of African American music. And that's how characteristics run throughout all the different styles. So, 1940s, a bombshell in black music. Rhythm and blues, led by the father of rhythm and blues, Louis Jordan. He'd come out of the big band era and from a family of musicians. He was an entertainer. His dad, he traveled as a kid with his dad, who did a lot of minstrel shows. So he had that entertaining idea, a comedic idea. Saxophone player. Remember, the trumpet has taken back seat to the saxophone. So you had rhythm and blues to emerge. It was the golden age of gospel music. Now, Thomas Dorsey had made his mark, and you had Mahalia Jackson and all of the other great singers going on, all in the same space. And then you had this exhilarating music, innovative music called bebop, all at the same time in black music. And these are the things that I think is very, very phenomenal and so diverse and just a reason to celebrate all to itself. So you had Charlie Parker, the great Charlie Parker playing alto saxophone, who was a student. He followed in the footsteps of Coleman Hawkins from the swing era, who who we labeled the father of the tenor saxophone, and also Lester Young, who we labeled as the president. Well, those two saxophone players influenced Charlie Parker, and many would say that Charlie Parker really changed music for the 20th century. Dizzy Gillespie, who invited Afro-Cuban music. So now you have Afro-Cuban jazz in American music, and you had the rhythm and blues. You also had the urban blues is still very much a part of it, of that era as well, and the golden age of gospel, 1940s. Very explosive time in black music. So, by the way, you can jump in anytime. You may have any comments. So
Uh,
that led into the
can I ask
1950s.
a question?
Pardon me?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So you mentioned first that the trumpet kind of was that was the instrument, and then it later changed to the sax. Why? What was it about the trumpet and or the sax in those moments that made them kind of take over and be the instrument of the field?
Well, I think the demand of the music, the change in the style of the music with the composers like Fletcher Henderson, who was Duke Ellington's mentor. It's even hard to imagine some of these great, great musicians were students of others and had mentors. But the jazz orchestra emerged because musicians wanted to have a greater opportunity to compose more extended works. So when that happened, that opened up the gate for the tenor saxophone to emerge as a principal instrument, and the trumpet took a different role. Not that it wasn't important, but it just took a different role. So as the evolution occurred in that way. In fact, in the 1940s, what happened was the instrumentation switched from the jazz orchestra. Because when I say jazz orchestra, many times and many students, they automatically think about a Western European classical orchestra with violins, violoncellos, etc. But no, in black music, the jazz orchestra uh, is a whole different instrumentation and a different, uh, with different core values, with improvisation and those type of things. But in 1940, you had the jazz quintet to emerge. That was the thing with alto saxophone, trumpet, bass drums, and piano. You go and when you see that, you know it's a jazz, it's a jazz, it's bebop jazz. That particular quintet. because later in the 1960s, you had hard bop, which consists of a sextet. You had trumpet, saxophone, and trombone. That connotated the hard bop, which was like bebop, but it infused more also of a gospel feel. It brought back that feeling that was going on in the 1940s with gospel, in the 1950s. So each decade, the evolution, uh, different little nuances and different little innovations occurred. But the trumpet, always took his rightful place. I guess it goes all the way back to Gabriel, the ancestral call, the responsibility, the special anointing of the trumpet. My good friend Winton said, if, we always know the trumpet players usually kind of feisty and called to take a certain type of leadership. So you still have that today on the bandstand when the trumpet and the saxophone, we're the trumpeters, and I'm a trumpeter myself. And so we're always kidding the saxophone players. They're always, messing with their reeds, licking on the reed and all. Their preparation is different. Trumpeters pick the instrument up and play it, you know what I mean? So, uh, but in this evolution, along the way, you just get a lot of knowledge. Uh, Art Blakey, I remember, and I remember when I was in Oakland and going to San Francisco at the Keystone Corner nightly, listening to the music, going backstage in the dressing room, getting advice and encouragement from these griots of musicians. And they would, uh, my dad being one of them, would put me up, push me up, prop me up on the bandstand to play with these masters. And Morcory Tyner, the pianist who played with John Coltrane, and then John Coltrane had, when he passed, McCoy kept the legacy going, and my dad and boy, man, my son played with you, and I was like, please, Dad, don't worry, I'm not. No, this is McCoy Tyner, and McCoy said, okay, okay, and told me to get my instrument out and sit, and he'll call me up, and so at this point, I am rehearsing everything that I've practiced, you know, on a day, all the technical exercises, everything, but I had no clue what I might play. I mean, the music was so elevated, and this is the last night on the last set, and they've been playing all week, so now the music is really high, and I have no idea what to do. And McCoy asked me to come up in the middle of a solo, in the middle of Azar Lawrence, who took John Coltrane's place. His solo was winding down, and McCoy nodded his head for me to walk on the stage, come up. I knew I should come up with confidence, so I did come up with confidence, but I had no clue of what to play. And so I just played a short motif of two notes, a rhythmic two notes. And immediately the musicians shifted gears, and I was engaged in the moment of call and response, taking, breathing, syncopating, playing on unexpected beats and using African vocality with moans and groans and things of this nature. And afterwards, McCoy told me, yeah, yeah, it's going to be all right. That word of encouragement uh, took me for the next 3 or 4 decades.
What is what is the gospel beat? You referenced the gospel beat. You also talked about the banjo. Um, what is the gospel beat? You kind of said how the beat right before the four on the New Orleans. What was and we also saw the change of gospel, in have current hip hop gospel, back then. Was it a certain, what chords or what was the rhythm at that point?
You know, it had a lit to it. It was similar to the ragtime, the 2 and 4 bounce.
Okay.
The
Oh, it's,
ragtime that's the left hand bounce, and the independent is left and right. Well, music, Sister Arizona Drains, she took that bounce, and then you had that da 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 da, da, and that bounce with it, which made that gospel beat. And
okay.
uh, and then there was a unexpected syncopation that I was mentioning earlier. It's just unexpected. You can drop an unexpected beat on a syncopation, like on the end of three, really the beat before four, that the New Orleans musicians took. Uh, and we subsequently started labeling that gospel beat with the New Orleans syncopation on the end of four, uh, the Pentecostal beat.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Uh,
and I guess also, I mean, it's more complex to be syncopated than it is just on the downbeat. And so you don't see much European music until they get really avant-garde as far as dealing with the syncopated beat.
yeah, the very simple thing is that if I would play for you John Philip Sousa, Stars and Stripes Forever, it's on the beat. It's on the strong beat, 1 and 3. And the 2 and 4 is the syncopated beats or the weak beats, 2 and 4. So black music, you know, you, you clapping on 2 and 4. European music, you clapping on 1 and 3 somehow. Uh, we would give concerts in Europe, and and you would want the audience to participate, and you ask them to clap with you, and somehow they find a way to clap on 1 and 3, and it's just like it's funny, and you can see that even in the dance. But it's 2 and 4 that gives the music its syncopation. It's off kilter. Off kilter of the beat is what swing is. It makes it swing. At the same time, about Pentecostal beat also, you have that philosophy, but the Pentecostal beat also is on every beat.
Mm, mm.
So you have that locomotion train going at the same time. So uh, the the Pentecostal beat is a beat that emphasizes every beat, but has the unexpected kilter of the syncopation with it on two. It could come anytime. And so you mix those things together. So a lot of people say, well, swing music is on the 2 and 4, and the drums is playing on 2 and 4, and that but during the swing era, the big bands, they would play the swing beat on every beat, with the bass drum playing on 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the off kilter syncopation would happen within the horn sections, with the soloists and using space. Miles Davis was great at using like space and silence in his music, in his improvisational approach.
That's
Uh,
fantastic.
the
Brother Bill,
chords,
I'm sorry. Sorry.
well, I was gonna say the harmony is very similar to the tonic and subdominant and dominant harmony that you find in the blues, the all-man cadence, and is the it's a part of um, the harmony that you hear in Western music. However, uh, is rooted still in terms in the pentatonic scale, the blues scale. The pentatonic is 5 notes, the blues note is 6 notes. It add additional notes for the blues scale. So everybody said, jazz, black music has the rhythm, but the harmony comes from Western classical or Western music. Not really. The harmony really also comes from African. because of the pentatonic. You listen to John Coltrane, you listen to any great soloist, they're using a pentatonic scale, and that's a 5-note scale. That's not an 8-note scale that comes from Western European music. You were going to say something?
Just gonna, Brother Bill has a question.
Yes, in various band configurations, I can kind of guess why different instruments might be added, but I'm not sure why you'd add more of the same instrument. Are those really multiples, or are there different ranges, or might the same instruments playing complementary but different music?
Well, they come from different families. You have the brass family and you have the woodwind family. And you may have 3 or 4 of the same instruments in the brass family and 3 or 4 same instruments. You have same instruments in the woodwind family. Within a family, within the difference of the families, I should say, they have different ranges. So you got the high voice, the middle voice, the tenor voice, or even the bass voice. So you need those instruments to have that broad expression of color. With the high voice being a soprano, the soprano might be the alto saxophone may play the soprano, or the alto saxophone may double on the clarinet to play soprano. And then you have the alto voices may range with the tenor saxophone to play anywhere from the tenor to the alto voices. You have the tenor voice and then the bass voice. The trumpet also is known to play the soprano voice. The soprano voice is the one that carries the tune, the melody, so to speak. So you need all those voices to complement one another. But at the same time, uh, the jazz experience is every voice and every musician has to play uh, their part where it's strong enough to stand on his own. It's independent of the other voices, yet it's collectively blends. You try to select notes that would just not be just a supportive, but also has its own melodic, contour. But it depends on the musical composition that you're playing, where you may need more instruments uh, than others.
So any instrument in the band might be brought forward, might be out front, depending on the music being played.
Everyone has an opportunity to bring their voice and share into the experience. Uh, any instrument can come forward and play a solo and share this space, in terms of equality, in terms of improvisation. I think the whole reason that I still play jazz is because of that fact of improvisation. You're always chasing a way to create and make up your part on the spot. The composer maybe gives a main theme, but the improvisationist takes it and improve upon a main theme by creating in a spontaneous way improvisation. Even the instruments like bass, the upright bass, there's an opportunity for the upright bass to play a solo, the drums, of course, piano, and then everybody who's what we consider frontline instruments like the saxophones and trumpets and trombones. Trombone being the hardest instrument um, of that whole group because of the slide, the configuration, and being able to use their ear to play the notes in tune and the dexterity that takes trombone. Trombone is a very difficult instrument to play jazz. Yeah.
And Brother Mondre, for your presentation, we have a couple more hands raised. Would you like to continue with the presentation, or would you like to take those questions now?
I'll take those questions now. I wanted to take you up through the 1950s and 1960s. I'll do that when there's no questions.
All right, we'll take these 2 questions and then we'll continue with the presentation. Brother Terrence, please.
Greetings, Madre. Thank you for this discussion and breakdown. I think it's very interesting when we think of jazz coming out at New Orleans and how the Congo Square and a lot of those attributes, the things that happened, more of the African traditions. Could you maybe elaborate more about why you feel those things happen there in New Orleans, maybe because of Congo Square, and how we heard more of those African traditions in early jazz?
Well, that Congo Square happened since 1820 because that was the day off.
Hmm.
The enslaved African had the day off. And they also had the ability to, they were given the privilege of playing their drums one day a week in Congo Square on Sundays. And so there was no other city in America like that. That tradition of playing the drums, speaking in a native language, and the coming together of the culture mixing at Congo Square, and then certainly took place even after 1865 on up to 1890, that exploded into the whole second line events in New Orleans. But it was in New Orleans in that field that is now a park. In fact, it's the Louis Armstrong Park now in Congo Square. And those traditions of the African American folk genres, particularly the ring shout, the ceremonial dance, the shuffling of the feet. Sometimes you can even see that dance in holiness churches right now, even not knowing that it's in the DNA from the ring shout. Uh, Along with, and they always did the ring shout with music, primarily Negro spirituals, and the three different, the cult spiritual, the Jubilee spiritual, and the sorrow spiritual. The spirituals were very prolific. In 1865, they published Slave Songs of the United States. There were more than 130 category spirituals in that publication. So very prolific, imaginative, creative work that our ancestors did, along with the work songs and field hollers. Some people call it field calls, but they brought that to Congo Square, and they were able to to gather and communicate. And it was I think it was really a primary, a very essential part of the move toward liberation and freedom for our ancestors. And so that tradition and bringing those musical genres together uh, ignited a fuse that really birthed the music of jazz. Jazz came out of it.
And we will go to Brother Katabazi and we'll continue with the question.
Yes, thank you, Brother Mondre, for being with us this evening. You touched earlier on the improvisational feature of jazz, and I'm curious if you have any insight as to what gave rise to that particular feature within the jazz genre, that of improvisation.
In the prior to 1940, the bebop era, you had improvisation that would occur with the jazz orchestras. And in the 1920s, it was Louis Armstrong, who was really known as the first great jazz soloist. He started it.
Mhm.
It was collective ad-libbing improvisation, if you will, of the New Orleans style. But when they got to Chicago, one of the primary differences between New Orleans and Chicago style jazz, besides instrumentation, was the musicians were able to expound more on improvisation, longer uh,
Mhm.
longer improvisational phrases, cadenzas and excerpts. Louis Armstrong played this piece called West End Blues, where he opened up and played a cadenza by himself before the band came in. It is that cadenza is known as the greatest 12 seconds in American music.
Wow.
What Louis Armstrong played on West End Blues, totally improvisational.
Mhm.
Then not only that, he would also invented and started scat singing because he didn't know if he didn't know the words, he was scat sing. And so he created not only was the first jazz soloist with the instrument, he was also the first jazz singer to do scat singing using syllables to it's like what the slave did with the attributes of African vocality. The moans and the groans were used as coded language. It's scat singing is similar to that. But the 1930s, other musicians were trying to make their way with improvisation. The improvisations were more kind of ad-libbed. But as they listened to Louis Armstrong's mentorship, they started developing. And by 1940s, Dizzy and Charlie Parker said, wait a minute, we want to have more opportunity to expound on these themes. You know, they got a little tired of sitting in the jazz orchestras
Mhm.
and just relegated to playing a certain role of their part and not enough opportunity to improvise. And
Mhm.
it was Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie wanted to play music faster and more exhilarating, and they started extending the palette, and they had to learn more study. And I should say that the more study, the practice, kind of also facilitated that, knowing your instrument and being able to
Mhm.
use the instrument as a voice to communicate. And so the evolution took place.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. So Parker and Dizzy was so complex, but what their technical skills were so advanced, many of the musicians couldn't keep up with him. So by the 1950s, they said, wait a minute, let's let's turn this thing back and we're going to develop the tale of, I call it the tale of two stories, West Coast jazz out there in California, all that easy living, and and East Coast jazz. Because we can't play on the level of Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. So let's tone it down, play more of a smooth sound, things that we can get to. And so that caused this idea of West Coast and East Coast. But the person that was the primary connector of those two was Miles Davis and his writing partner, Gail Evans. They connected those two opposite ends together. And they in the 50s, they created, as a composer myself, some of the greatest music that's ever been played. You know, Porgy and Bess, for example, they did arrangements. The Birth of the Cool, the many albums that they made together. Now the instrumentation is like 19 pieces. It's beyond the jazz orchestra. He's using French horns and oboes and different other uh, Western European instruments along with the jazz orchestra. And that's when Miles Davis emerged. Now, Miles Davis was a student of Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. He was Charlie Parker's roommate, so that he can learn as much as he could from Charlie Parker. This is the jazz experience I'm talking about, because his daddy was a very prominent dentist. Sent him to Juilliard. Miles said he played the blues, but he never really had the blues. And so he was paying Charlie Parker's rent in New York City and trying to learn all he could. They called him Little Miles. Now, Miles went on to change music at least 5 times. He played bebop, and Dizzy said, "Wait, Little Miles. I mean, if you want to play, you have to learn something about this particular alternate dominant scale, and you have to learn these things, you know." And Miles was a really good student. So the 50s, Miles created cool jazz. And Gail Evans, his writing buddy, had spent a lot of time on the West Coast and Miles on the East Coast. And they put those styles together and created this phenomenon. I think they did about 9 albums in the 1960s, I mean 1950s, this label, Cool Jazz. And bebop still exists up until 19, I think 55. at the death of Charlie Parker, when Charlie Parker died in '55, a lot of musicians didn't know what direction we would take at this point. It was almost like when Bach died, 1714, you know, uh, in the Baroque period, you know, it was the end of an era. And the same thing with Charlie Parker, it was the end of the era. But you had hard bop to emerge with Art Blakey, who was another, besides McCoy, was another person I had direct contact with and was motivational with my career. He would always ask me, "When are you coming to New York?" You know, all these musicians we're talking about, you end up in New York, no matter what. No matter who you are, you name them. The question is, when are you coming to New York? So Art Blakey, he when he heard me play, and you know, I know he was really like my fire. I played trumpet with a lot of energy and fire at the time. Still do actually, but Art would say, "When are you coming to New York?" And he had a band together over 35 years. Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, an institution. That's a point that I want to make about the 1930s. All these bands, more than 20 black institutions. Of course, Duke Ellington's band, he had from 1926 to when he died in 1973. I subsequently played with his band in the 1990s, and that was a really lesson that I got, an education that I got on the road traveling with the Duke Ellington Orchestra, and offered me a lot of insight and critique up on music in the classroom that I go into in my book. Um, but the 1950s, going into hard bop and cool jazz, but the bombshell hit in the turbulent time of the 60s. You know, a man on the moon, so supposedly, but the not supposedly, John Glenn what was it, 1967 or something like that. But the turbulent time of the 1960s, death of King Malcolm X, you know, cities, burning of cities. It was a turbulent time in our history. And you had avant-garde jazz to emerge with Ornette Coleman, the father of avant-garde jazz, free jazz, or avant-garde jazz, is Ornette Coleman. And a part of also my experience and success comes from the fact that Ornette was like a godfather to me. He was grew up being best friends with my dad. He was best man at my mom and dad's wedding, and he's from the time I was, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old. He would give me records to listen to and that kind of thing. And my dad was very much a part of that 1960s movement. The John Coltrane got attached to studying with Arnett and led to A Love Supreme. But you had still rhythm and blues from the 1950s soul music. Now you had rhythm and blues in the 1960s soul music that moved to funk. You had funk, avant-garde, uh, jazz. You still had hard bop. You still had a diverse musical forms in black music. But the avant-garde musicians wanted to, you know, redefine their identity, you know, make certain that our identity was not tied to Eurocentric assumptions about black identity, and they deal with the spirituality of the music, almost like a really return to the sacred spirituals in a sense, the pentatonic. You listen to Love Supreme that John Coltrane recorded, and you'll hear the same kind of pentatonic scales that were involved with the Negro spirituals. You will hear the shout, the field shouts in his instrument, the way he would scream on his instrument. So he invoked a lot of the characteristics and the core values of black music in that way. So I'll just pause a little bit here. The music, the turbulent time of the 60s. You got Pharoah Sanders, who also, I think he was really, I was going to say, I met him in Oakland in the 80s. Pharoah Sanders, we would meet up at Mr. Major's on Sunday, and he was a good friend with Ed Kelly, who mentored a lot of musicians in Oakland, and we would play jam sessions. Places like that, institutions like Mr. Majors, or in Harlem, New York, you had Mittens Playoffs, where bebop was allowed to be nurtured and performed. In the Cotton Club, and out in San Francisco, as I mentioned, the Keystone Corner. These were institutions that nurtured the music. But in the 60s, you had Max Roach with Abbey Lincoln, Cecil Taylor, Arnett Coleman, Sun Ra, just a host of avant-garde musicians who now took that displacement of the beat, performing the music with no expectations of the metrics of the rhythm, and really painting outside the lines, uh, performing as if you were looking at some painting, artwork, would not stay to just strict time. And so to express themselves in their quest for liberation. That was that particular era allowed me to explore more with my improvisation, and I was able to grow in the 1970s coming out of that movement. It's more really experimental, and so I was able to have an opportunity to grow. And so when I played with McCoy, I had had so much background in that particular genre of avant-garde music. I knew without having a structure, I knew how to create structure out of call and response. And that was a fertile part. I think that is the main aspect of my teaching, what I got from the avant-garde and able to allow students and encourage students to express themselves. Miles Davis used to say, "There's no wrong notes." Well, that is true. It's 12 notes of music, no wrong notes, but it all depends upon, what note comes before and what note comes after the alleged wrong note that's supposed to exist. You have to be able to resolve any particular of the notes. There's no wrong notes. So the 1970s, the passing of John Coltrane, and John Coltrane was so much involved with Arnett Coleman's music. He requested my dad and Arnett uh, perform at his homegoing service, and they did. My baby brother, a drummer, played also at that homegoing service for John Coltrane. I subsequently his son, Ravi Coltrane, is a great musician, just totally underrated, that we need to hear more of. But after the 1970s, things got a little lost with the losing of John Coltrane, just kind of similar to what they did, how things turned out with the loss of Charlie Parker. So you had jazz fusion to emerge, different musicians going into retirement. I think in the 70s, Miles Davis went into a semi-retirement. The only groups that were playing, the Moffett family was one of the principal groups that was still alive and well and traveling and playing. And throughout the entire 70s, and gaining a very good reputation as playing the music and playing the music with integrity until the emergence of the early 1980s or mid 1980s, when the young lions of jazz emerged with Marcellus. But we had, I think, 79, the emergence of rap music. um, Sugar Hill Gang. So it was a walk through the wilderness in the 1970s with music. There were only a few.
Can I, Brother Sebastian has a question.
Brother Mondre,
Mhm.
good stuff. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Um, you mentioned something about the New Orleans music. You mentioned the East Coast, West Coast type of music, and my family is rooted in the Carolinas, and
Oh,
I've got family members and stuff that had come up, and there's this Morrisville brass band that they have, and um, as a kid, when I would go back and listen to that music, oh yeah, I mean it was totally different than the smoothness of West Coast. I mean it would punch you. You know, you've got the trumpet, the trombone, the tuba, and it had a New Orleans flair to it. I don't know if you're familiar with any of that stuff from back that way, but when you're talking about the field calls, and I mean you can hear it in the music. I mean I heard my aunties and grandmas and stuff, using those calls to get in contact with each other some acres away, but yeah, I mean, what you sharing, I'm feeling all of it. Thank you.
yeah, Carolina, man, North and South Carolina, it was something in the water because uh, my friend Branford Marcellus moved to North Carolina to because John Coltrane was from there. Nina Simone, Woody Shaw, Thelonious Monk, which I should have mentioned along with Charlie Parker and Dizzy. Thelonious Monk was sitting at the piano at Midness Playhouse, was a music director, and composition. Now, totally unique, totally unique conception that fits well with bebop because he would always play the dissonance. He was a master of playing dissonance and figured out a way to make it resolve in an unusual way with this unexpected syncopation thing that we're talking about, the displacement of beat and the displacement of harmony from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And of course, my wife and we lived in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is right next to High Point. And I played for several years, every year, the John Coltrane Jazz Festival in High Point, where he grew up before John Coltrane left for Philadelphia, and then, of course, ended up in New York.
Mhm.
But I got a taste of that, and I had a lot of gigs in North Carolina. It's a lot of music goes on in North Carolina. HBCUs, they have jazz programs. Central University in Durham have one of the finest jazz curriculum programs, where Branford Marcellus was teaching up until about a couple years ago. He moved back to New Orleans, Branford Marcellus did. But he was teaching there, and I did a lot of things with their faculty. I taught it at North Carolina A&T, Agricultural and Technical State University, I should say, for 15 years there in Greensboro, North Carolina, which is only and it's next door to High Point with John Coltrane. Big statue of John Coltrane. They honor him. Um, I taught there for 15 years. It's only about 40 miles from Central University, Delta HBCU. Probably don't have to tell you that North Carolina, South Carolina has a lot of black institutions. The Greensboro Four, who was stood at the lunch counter uh, in '62. This is where Jesse Jackson went to school, um, and demanded integration in the Woolworths and a wildfire. I wrote a song about it called Wildfire. It just went all over America where lunch counter sit-ins. Max Roach, the avant-garde musician who played bebop, I should mention him also in the 40s. Max Roach did an album called Freedom Now. We insist, freedom now. And he has a picture of those A&T students. They were young freshmen sitting at the lunch counter uh, on the face of his album cover. So this is what the avant-garde movement was about. But yeah, I can relate to what you're saying about North Carolina. It is special, you know. Brass bands, we used to do New Orleans things, Mardi Gras in North Carolina a lot, and kind of reflect the imagery of that New Orleans culture. But New Orleans is special. Let me just go back to that because I spent some time in New Orleans working on the Buddy Bolden film. Myself, Marcellus, when Marcellus was the executive director, the executive producer of the film, and I was the trumpet coach. I coached the lead actor on how to pretend to be a trumpet player because he was not a musician. And every night we'll be playing in different places, you know, in the French quarters, and it's just it was like no other city that I had ever experienced, and no in terms of music, uh, and being in New Orleans. So anything close to that is also going to generate a lot of just great good time feelings. The feeling of it is is I could say as much of what the jazz experience is all about.
Mondre, a question it comes to mind that the music and the complexity of the orchestras and the band and understanding everything. And, we're talking about eras where people had just been, quote, emancipated, supposedly, but whether they could even read a book and they were developing music. So therefore we know like in some of the spiritual, the call and response type singing or raising up or bringing up a hymn that because they couldn't necessarily read the words. So they would, bread of heaven, kind of thing. And then they repeat, go through that. And you have people who have the gift and who can improvise or hear music. But what is your thought, besides, the creator gives you the gift of looking at how a people who they tried to keep down were had the genius to write music. Well, I mean, did they even know how to write? But they could write music. That's, I mean, that's an incredible phenomenon to me. When you talk about the beat, the syncopation, look at the tones, the rhythms, and then writing words to songs and having just learned how to read. I mean, what's your take on that? How that fits into our story?
I'm still in awe of that. I think I said the phenomenon of black music is a phenomenon. In other words, it can't be explained. It's like, but what we do know is from the oral tradition. That's our tradition. We have an oral tradition. We pass down the story, in storytelling and through word of mouth, in opposed to the literal tradition. That's more of a tradition in European culture, Western European culture. You two opposite worlds, literal and oral tradition. And so the griot, storyteller, and some of these musicians, that's what they represent. And the griot is always the virtuoso, the virtue with so much virtuosity on their instruments as well. The griot was a musician, and more than likely, what I have a trumpeter, you know, and with just storytelling. But uh, Dr. King said that God has endowed the black person, the black humanity with the gift of music to take life and put it into music only to come out with some newfound hope and triumph. That was a quote that King had said. I kind of paraphrased it as he tried to explain it, you know. they asked King to speak at he was an MC, a master of ceremonies at a jazz festival at someplace in Europe. I don't recall where exactly, but he made that statement, and definitely he was a lover of jazz music, and he made that statement about this phenomenon of black music. Uh, and then not only that, but have so much diversity within that to to run parallel in the same space. And I don't get me started on the blues. I started talking the blues that came into effect, and you know, Amir Baraka say, we're blues people. Uh, to be able to the whole dichotomy, to be able to live in a space of something, uh, bitterness and sweetness occupying the same space. The country blues and the urban blues and the jazz blues and all of the different aspects of blues music that came straight out of the work songs and the spirituals, the sorrow spirituals especially. Um, it's just phenomenal. And the spirituals, with that same idea, the spirituals, where they had abolitionists that they were just hanging around the camp meetings and writing down what they heard. And I would encourage you to get this book, Slave Songs of the United States. It's 130 spirituals that's constructed in this book of collection of songs, published in 1867. So imagine that our ancestor was that prolific. And while they're doing that, that was spirituals. We were still performing now folk music, which doesn't have a really author. That's kind of the nature of folk music. Who wrote When the Saints Go Marching In, which is a spiritual? It's a folk song. All these songs. Now, take Amazing Grace, for example, though. John Newton gets credit for writing Amazing Grace to the words, but it's clear that he was a captain of a slave ship and had some conversion, but it was clear that he heard at the bottom, in the belly of the slave ship, that moan, that pentatonic West African chant moan that we sing Amazing Grace, that he took, that's where he got the melody from. Who really, songs are copywritten and recognized by the melody, not even the rhythm. So he wrote words, John. So anyway you see that puppy, it's that Amazing Grace, words by John Newton, music unknown, or it might say music slave unknown. If you research Amazing Grace, that's what. But that was also part of this 130 some odd spirituals uh, that they compiled, slave songs of the United States. And while that's going on, you had blues emerge, and you had uh, ragtime to emerge. So you had three different genres that all had different styles uh, in our culture. It's really, it's really, it's who we are. I can't explain that. Now, what happened, Sister Doris, was the 1930s. Ellington, Fletcher Henderson, Count Basie, and Benny Goodman, who they called the King of Swing, really wasn't the King of Swing. Fletcher Henderson was. He was playing all of Fletcher Henderson's music. Fletcher Henderson was a black man that went to Clark Atlanta. Left to go to New York to study at Columbia to study uh, chemistry, I think. But was such a great composer, did the Rainbow Ballroom for many years. And when the Depression hit, he had to lose his jazz orchestra. He couldn't form it from his jazz orchestra. So Benny Goodman hired him to write music arrangements for him and compositions. So he took excuse me, all of Fletcher Henderson music, plus all the new arrangements. So all these big hits that you hear Benny Goodman play, uh, they were composed by Fletcher Henderson, every last one of them. Now, it was that era that they taught themselves to read notation.
Mm, okay.
They taught themselves to read notation. And part of it was being in New York, they can play in this place over here, cross and go right across on 52nd Street and read their books. They would go from club to club on the intermissions, reading different books to sharpen their skills. But that's when the jazz orchestras begin to flourish because musicians learn to read music. I think they really probably just from hearing it, still the oral tradition, but they looking at the page and they hearing it, and then they putting that together. That's some kind of genius all to itself as well.
And but and I think about church musicians and music and straight writing versus then here are the chords. I mean, the complexity of the chords. I mean, when did that writing it with the chords, or was it always kind of like that? You know what I'm saying? So go what key are you doing it in? You know, kind of thing.
Yeah, the gospel musicians, even today, they have a musical language all of their own
Mm.
that somebody need to systematically codify. Um, I have a lot of gospel students coming back to school to learn to read music, and some of them, feel really, uh, you know, they kind of feel a certain kind of way. They don't want you to know that they don't know about how to read. But gospel musicians are walking around with perfect pitch, you know, can hear the note, know what it is, and holding up one or two fingers, trying to tell you how many sharps or flats or how many black keys. They got some kind of sign language going on. I don't really know what it is. I know a little of it is keys. So they learn their keys like it's two sharps, or maybe the left hand would say three flats. And once they know the tonality, they know every harmonic sequence of the diatonic scale, that everything is part of that family. And in addition, the oral skills will allow them to go outside of that, but they always know where they are. And the phenomenal thing is, and I heard a gospel piano player do this just a couple of days ago, the singer kept modulating. There's 12 keys of music. She must have modulated all 12 of them. Because you got this, what do you call it? You got this vamp device in the gospel music. The gospel music is like I said, it's a whole nother language of its own. The swing lead, hard gospel, vamp devices, those kind of things happen in gospel music. Um, and this piano player went through all the keys, just wherever she went. My mother was a great pianist like that. I remember at the church in Oakland, it was the afternoon program. And this guy got up and he just walked up. I'm gonna sing a song, and this is a Presbyterian church, by the way. I'm gonna sing this song, and I know it's somebody up in here can back me up. And he just kept on coming out, and nobody would get up at the piano because he's just gonna. Nobody know. I got a song in my heart to sing. And my mother, I was sitting by her, and she said, "Let me get up and play this song so that he can go sit down." And she got up and he started singing, and she followed him and backed him up. It was nothing discussed, no key or nothing. And I still marvel at that today. How did she do that? No one would have the courage to try to go up and back this guy up, and they got through it. But the gospel musicians, some incredible musicians. I don't. It's a special divine calling. Well, I guess we're going to stumble up on the reason and how they do it by recognizing just the divine call and the anointing, the power of God, the assignment. These musicians have a particular assignment, and God gives them the tools to meet that assignment. That's what it is. God gives them all that they need because they themselves can't explain it. I got an 18-year-old kid as a gospel, and by the way, the gospel musicians, they play all the instruments. Drums, piano, they play all the instruments. If you're a gospel musician, you play all the instruments that's used: drums, piano, organ, bass. I got one kid that has perfect pitch like I've never heard before. He's 18 years old, and he couldn't read. Is this his second year? No, it's first year. No. Did I have him last year? Yes. Okay. He's a sophomore. Yes. First year, he couldn't read, and he's taking class with me. And now he's my best reader. He can read notation and write down the notes with his just sitting at his desk. You can play a whole piano thing. He writes the whole score down, and he's a drummer. And out of all my years of teaching, I've never had a student this talented. So this is where I am now. I'm at a point in my life where I'm getting the most talent I've ever had in my life, and I've had some good students, including Carl Wheeler, who Tony, music director, Frankie Beverly Mays, and Walter Hawkins. Of course, to your audience, one of the greatest thrills of my life was playing with Walter and Edward Hawkins and Tremaine and those folks. I was on their Love Alive 4 project, and the chorus that they come up with was just, I did with them what I did with Duke Ellington when I was playing Duke Ellington's band. I would be sitting looking at everybody's part to see what are the notes that's causing this much energy and fire and warmth. And I would just kind of be studying. And I did the same thing with the Hawkins family. When Walt and Edward and those guys sit down to play. I did some intimate recording sessions with them with Jay Spencer. My first gig in Oakland, in California, when I moved to California in 1973, was with Walter Hawkins doing a rhythm and blues gig in Sacramento.
Wow.
He had already done Oh Happy Day, and he was on a rhythm and blues gig. Wasn't gospel, it was rhythm and blues. A guy named Herbie Mims learned that I was in town and hired me. And I rode with him to Sacramento, and Walter Hawkins was the singer. And that's the life of living in Oakland.
That's amazing. And I think we have time for one more question. I know we're getting to time of this just phenomenal presentation. Brother Damani, come off mute for the last question, please. Are you still on mute, Brother Damani?
Oh, thank you for your presentation, Professor. Yeah, just what I'm reading now. You made me want to finish reading this book. This is by Scott Joplin, The Ragtime Years.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And hey, one quick question. I know you heard of Katz Anderson and Jabbo Smith. A couple of years ago, I did a study of the Jenkins Orphanage Band. Reverend Daniel Jenkins. After the Civil War, there was a lot of kids who were running around the streets of, I think it was Columbus, North South Carolina, somewhere. Anyway, he convinced the city to give him $100, told him he'd get these thieving kids off the street. And a lot of these kids became instrumental in the jazz era of in the Harlem Renaissance, like Jabbo Smith. Williams Cat Anderson, Freddie Green.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. And one more quick question. You heard of Wynton Marsali's Harvard Lecture Series, right? The Harvard Lecture Series.
Yes, I haven't listened to the whole presentation, but
Okay,
I've
yeah, it's 25 lecture. Man, it's dynamite. Anyway, he talks about we've been in a culture of dark ages. Would you say we're in a culture of dark ages?
Well, I think that Dr. King in the 1960s wrote this book, say, "Where do we go from here? Community or chaos?"
Right.
And in the 60s, the jazz, the avant-garde musicians had something to say about that response. You know, James Brown said loud, "I'm black and I'm proud."
Right.
Max Roach was talking about freedom now, and so that was response. I don't think that the musicians today are have the same kind of social consciousness and the
Right.
same
Right.
type of integrity, and truth telling is a major part of it. I mean, if you need to study, didn't sound you were not woodshedding. The musicians used to say you need to go practice before you come back out here. Charlie Parker was told that he went somewhere for 9 months and came back and they didn't believe it. The musicians are the days I hear musicians, it seems like they are settling for something less than excellent.
Okay.
I don't know I don't know if you want to call it the dark ages, but if you look at the tradition, not traditionalism, but the tradition of our culture and our music and what Doris was talking about, it's hard to find that now.
Right.
It's hard to find that, and so um, you know, I don't know if we, but there is hope. There is hope because there's
Yeah.
like I just mentioned this kid I was just telling you about the best perfect pitch, 18. Uh,
Right.
so we have a glimmer of hope. So I hope not, but I think that hope that we're not in the dog ages. But I think that because our response should be bigger as musicians, as artists. Paul Robeson said, "An artist must fight for freedom or slavery." And I don't know if artists have lost their way or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I got a million things to say, but I'm not going. I studied the field hollow music, all that stuff, the spirituals. I was studying the spirituals about a month ago, and like what they said, the slaves was not allowed to talk in the fields, but they found a way that the slave masters, they found out through the carriage driver driving the slave master and his wife to church. They found out that they didn't bother, spiritual music didn't bother them. And so when they went back, they told them that we can sing spirituals. And for example, when they say roll, Jordan, roll, they was talking about the Mississippi River. When they say sweet chariot coming for to carry me home, in the spirituals, they was talking about Harriet Tubman is coming. Um, and so, yeah, I was studying those spirituals, man.
Certainly those spirituals are part of an act of resistance.
Right.
And a way of communicating the field hollers and the spirituals with the cult language. Wading in the water was like
Right.
that's where the dogs would lose your scent.
Uh-huh.
And so it was so much of that communication and quest for freedom.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that's what black music is. I mean, that's where black music come from. And I hope we don't lose our way.
Right. And diatonic scale. What's the diatonic scale? What's that?
If I could, Brother Damani,
I'm sorry.
I think we have 1,000 questions for
Yeah, I know.
Brother Mondre, and this has been absolutely phenomenal. And as we begin to close, I would just ask everyone to come off mute and give Brother Mondre the recognition that he deserves for what he has blessed us with today.
Thank you, Bubba.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you so much, brother.
Excellent.
Mondre.
Excellent.
Appreciate it.
This was food for the soul. Thank you so much.
And what's the name of your book?
Oh, Black Music Footprints.
Oh, I missed the
Black
beginning.
Music Footprints, the Jazz Experience.
Mm.
That's the name of the
Okay.
book. Yeah.
In the preface, it hooked me when it mentions Garvey. I was like, oh, this is my book. Pan-Africanist Marcus Garvey's words continue to resonate through the ages when he shared the importance of Black people cherishing and honoring their African heritage and cultural origins. As we explore the odyssey of African American music, we discover a badge of honor for the unconquered parts of a people who transformed history's darkest moments into a triumphant narrative of survival and creativity. And that was on page 8 of the introduction. So I got the book and I lit up with it. And so as you're looking for gifts for the holiday, this is a great gift to study, So I mean, I can't say like me and Imhotep would spend hours with Mondre and Diane, his wife. The Reverend Dr. Diane Moffett is also on, and his sister-in-law Jacqueline, who's a church musician here in Sacramento, is also on. And this has been truly a treat, Mondre. I mean, I'm gonna have to make it to Kentucky to see you in person and to hear you.
Now, you know what? I got, see I'm gonna have to come to California. And so, Diane, if you're on, you make sure that we can do that
And
together.
if you come, we will set up for you to perform here in Sacramento. Okay.
That's
All right. So you give us a date and we'll set it up.
Mm.
All right, Yusef, sorry.
Right.
No, I hand it to you, Mama Doris, or to anyone who would like to pray us out for the evening. Phenomenal.
Go ahead. Mama Zarita, is that you?
Oh, great God. We give thanks right now, oh, Holy Mut Amun Ra, for this blessing that abounds unto the ears, the soul, the hearts, the minds of all who have heard this great scholar, this Seba of righteous music, this holiness that has blessed us so mightily. Oh, we give thanks. And truly we will leave here better than when we came. Bless Mondre Moffett and his sacred compliment, Mama Diane. Oh, we are blessed this evening. We give thanks. And oh, what a joy for the song that uplifts and bless. Truly the ancestors are pleased, those who are excellent of spirit. Ashe. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Ashe.
All right. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Gee,
Yeah.
thank you guys so much for inviting me. This has been an absolutely joy to be with you at this moment in time in my journey and in your journey. So thank you. Bless you. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you.